Good morning. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, welcome to the hands of Anna Walker in the studio of StabThingsIntoExistence.com. Welcome, welcome. We are on WTF What to Felt Wednesday. And what we're going to do is continue, pardon me, the project that we started yesterday. Remember, we did the simple landscape layout. And the only thing that I have added to this, and believe it or not, it was on my mind all night long. Remember, we used the chiffon ribbon to create the tree silhouette? Well, I realized it was a little blocky. So what I did was, first thing this morning when I came downstairs, I grabbed some black pencil roving and I split it up into very, very fine tendrils. And I added some additional branches and bits of stuff. And I honestly think that it makes this tree look even better than it did yesterday. So we're ready to wet this down. Now I'm using my ball brows with some warm soapy water today. And the reason I'm using my ball brows is because it allows me to add the water just very lightly on top of our project. It's a gardening tool, and it is one that I use frequently that is very, very helpful when it comes to wetting down our projects. And I just want to make sure, especially that all around where the chiffon is gets wetted down really well. And remember, we've got a lot of different layers of embellishment in here. You can see how the color is changing just simply from adding the water to it. And if we get too much on it, we can always soak that up. I always have a microfiber towel on hand to do exactly that. But right now, I'm just going to cover it with another piece of bubble wrap. I slid the painting layout onto a 2-foot length of bubble wrap, bubble sides up. And I usually do bubble sides up just to make sure that I have plenty of agitation. And that's something that you'll, experiment with. There may be some layouts that have an awful lot of embellishments that you may not want to have the bubbles agitating quite that much. Now I am noticing that I have plenty of water here, so I'm just going to tilt my tray down and drain some of that right back off into my bowl of soapy water. We want completely saturated, but we don't want puddles of water hanging around. So I can still probably take some more off, and I may do exactly that after I have done this first part. The first part of this process is just a simple massage over the top. Now you are going to want to have a little moisture on your hand so that it will slide across the top of the bubble wrap. And this is just a very, very gentle pressure. We're not rubbing really hard. If you find that your hands aren't slick enough, you can add a little bit of soap to your hand to help slick it up and make it possible for your hand to slide over the top of the bubble wrap. But it's just a simple little massage action. And yes, we will do this from both sides. I'm going to work this top side first, and I'm paying a special attention to the areas that have that chiffon ribbon, because that chiffon is going to have the wool fibers from underneath and the wool fibers from the pencil roving on top to migrate through that chiffon ribbon to encapsulate it or trap it so that it becomes an integral part of the piece. It is a style of Nuno felting. It's Nuno felting when you get fiber to migrate through a base fabric. And it doesn't matter that our base fabric in this particular project isn't for the entire piece, it's still Nuno felting. And the reason I chose to go with that chiffon ribbon is because I want to see what the ruching and the texture will do to my tree silhouette when we are done with the project. And again, there's no way to force the fibers to migrate through. It's just a matter of coaxing them very delicately with soft touches and soft massages to get those fibers to start migrating through. I'm going to flip this over. That's why we have two pieces of bubble wrap here. And you can see from the back side, we have our land portion and we have our sky portion here. And we're just going to do the same thing that we did on the front on the back. And just give it a light massage. The nice thing about using pre-felt is that you get a little bit of integrity just from having that partially felted wool like a fabric underneath your piece. It also makes your layout for a fiber painting go so much quicker, because instead of having to lay out a layer of fiber one direction, a layer of fiber another direction, and sometimes even a third layer going back again to the first direction to get that, you want the fibers to interlock in a lot of different ways. The pre-felt takes care of that base fabric. I remember one of my first felt paintings, I didn't know about pre-felt, and I would, and you know, it was early in my felting career, and I did some pretty heavy layouts, and I got to tell you, I had one layout that was easily 8 inches deep. And yes, when I got it wet, it just went whoom. But it's a lot of fiber, and pre-felt just speeds up that process, speeds up that time-consuming part of the layout to make it possible for you to get onto the fun stuff. Now, I can feel just with my hand that my trunk is right here. So I am going to make sure that I give a little extra attention right in here, and I want the attention to go both, you know, every direction, so that those fibers know that however they decide to migrate through that chiffon ribbon, they can do that. And then I know my branches are up here all over the place, and so I'm just giving some extra little love and attention to the back side of where my tree is. And I can already see that those black fibers are beginning to show up, because I can see, I'm going to pull this up so you can see it too. Be careful when you remove, even when you're on the pre-felt side, be careful when you remove your bubble wrap. Can you see how it's a little darker right here? That's the black coming through. So we've got a good start, but I am noticing that we don't have as much soap in this solution as I want. So I am going to flip my bubble wrap over so that I can add some soap from my bar of soap. This is just a handmade soap that I bought, and it works really well for small felted soaps, but it also works beautifully when I need to do what I'm doing right here, and that is adding some extra soap to my piece without adding any extra water. And so I'm just going to press that down into the fiber and the pre-felt, and then I'll give it another little massage before we flip this over and take a look at the front side. So there's nothing really magical about this magical process. I know that doesn't make any sense. Except that, you know, wet felting is very, very easy to figure out. You just need to make sure you have the right fiber, and then you can use pretty much any soap. I use dishwashing liquid, I use handmade soaps. I've tried olive oil soap. I don't think it's worth the expense, in my opinion, but there are some people that swear by it. When I was getting started, my husband worked with someone who did handmade soap, and I bought her scraps, her end pieces. that she couldn't really do anything with. They were too small for her to be able to sell as bars. And I was able to buy just a random assortment of whatever she had left over for, you know, a discounted price. And that worked out wonderfully for me. And I think for her too. All right, let's flip this over now. And we're going to be very careful as we lift off the top. The back side was easier to lift off because we had that pre-felt there, remember? So we just had that single piece, but we've got a lot of fibers in here, and I want to make sure I don't pull any of them loose. That is looking amazing. All right, let's add some soap to this side as well. I mean, we've all got scraps of bubble wrap around the house. You may not have a ball browser like I do, but you probably have a spray bottle, an empty, you know, spray bottle from clothing pre-treatment before laundry, or an old cleaner bottle of some sort. Clean it out, use it to apply your soapy water to your felting project. Again, I'm being very careful as I lift this off, and then flipping it over. And let's add that soap to this side as well. More soap is better in the beginning processes of wet felting because it's the soap that opens up the scales on the fibers. Wool fibers, and that's any kind of animal wool, has scales on it. And when you change the pH, adding soapy water to it, those scales open up. And then as you begin your friction, your massaging, and your rolling, those scales start to connect to one another to form felt. And a scientific explanation of felting and how it works. I am all for keeping it as simple and easy to understand as possible. So we're just going to massage a little bit more. Again, I'm paying a little bit extra attention to this front side because that's where our embellishments are. And I want to make sure that I get those fibers to migrate through that chiffon ribbon, because that is going to give us some incredible sculptural detail when we get to the end of our project. You'll see what I mean. Felting comes together depending on the types of fibers that you're using. You can get, excuse me, you can get some texture, pardon me again, you can get some texture just by mixing the different types of wools. Wools all, you know, depending on the breed, depending on the animal, they all have different staple lengths. Some wool grows out very, very long, and you can get, you know, 10, 12-inch long pieces of a singular fiber that long. Some fiber is very short, and you're lucky if you get an inch. But those differences in lengths will give you some ruching, some gathering action as they interact with one another, and give you a little bit of sculptural detail that there's no way you could plan into it. You could try and needle felt that texture in, but I'm here to tell you it's going to be noticeable that you manually added it instead of the fibers doing what the fibers do. And the ruching that happens when you're doing Nuno felting is something that cannot, in my opinion, be recreated manually with needle felting. And trust me, I have tried. I've used my felting machine to try and mechanically engineer a Nuno felt. And while it works, it is not as delicate, not as detailed, not as ethereal in the sculpture and the ruching that it brings as taking the time to massage those fibers and allow the fibers to integrate in a natural way instead of in a mechanical way. Again, paying special attention to the tree because we want those fibers to do their migrating between the bits of wool and want them to migrate through that chiffon ribbon to give us that texture that we're hoping for. The other thing that I love about wet felting, as opposed to needle felting, is that a great deal of the felting action happens while the fiber layout is wrapped up and encased in bubble wrap and towels and rolled. I mean, a lot of the action happens with you not being aware of how it's happening until you open it up. So when I'm wet felting, it's almost like Christmas, my birthday, you know, my anniversary, all of that all at once, because it's always a surprise. And it is very, very rarely a bad surprise. Usually I am pleasantly surprised beyond my expectations because the fibers have done something that I couldn't have imagined when I first started laying it out. So I'm adding a little bit extra pressure, not really pressing down, but I am being a little bit more intentional. When you start working your wet felting project, you need to be very, very delicate, because if you press too hard, if you put the water down too abruptly, if you scrub instead of gently massaging, you can dislodge your design, and that is counterintuitive. You want your design to stay put. So if you work up to the pressure slowly, your chances of having the piece be what you laid out and with minimal distortions are going to be much better. Excuse me again. I'm going to flip this over again, and let's work the back side. Now the back side I can work a little bit more aggressively because it's got the pre-felt. There's nothing that's going to dislodge as I rub side to side, rub around and around. This pre-felt is pretty much going to stay exactly where I put it. And I was delicate on the first round, and I am being, you know, a lot more forceful on this time, because I want these fibers to really start jumping into the felting process. Again, coming at it from different directions is always going to make for a stronger felt piece. And you can see I'm being a little aggressive. I'm holding my bubble wrap on one corner just to make sure that it doesn't move around while I'm rubbing. Now we're not going to do all of the felting of this today. In fact, I am going to stop here in just a couple of minutes before we get to the rolling part, and I will work on this a little bit later with the rolling part. And then tomorrow we will come back and I'll show you the fulling portion or the finishing portion of the felting. And I'll tell you how many rolls I did from each direction, and it will make it possible for you to recreate this if you wish. Now, we've been felting this for a while, so I didn't have to be as delicate when I pulled up the bubble wrap here. And that's looking good. We're starting to get the fibers to come together. What I'm doing now is called the pinch test. And the pinch test is one of the first things that you'll look for. On the back side here, it's not near as important as it is on the front side. Because with the pinch test, we are looking to see if the fibers are starting to connect to one another. And as I'm looking at this, it's just barely beginning to start to connect. And I want to look especially in my areas that have the chiffon. Oh, that's nice. The chiffon is starting to grab. That's good. Our Nuno aspect is working out well. The chiffon is starting to come together. So this is where I'm going to leave it for right now. We will come back to this tomorrow, and I will have done the rolling already, and I'll explain to you the process of the rolling before we start the fulling process tomorrow. Wet felting is amazing because you can let it sit, you can let it dry, you can let it just be for overnight, you can let it be for a couple of hours, you can let it be for a couple of days before you come back to it. All you need to do is re-wet it, make sure that you get your fabric moistened again all the way through, and then you can start where you left off. Now, I have found that doing so makes the fibers reactivate. Not react, but reactivate. Letting it sit for a while lets those fibers sort of ease into where they are now. And then when you get them wet again, they're like, okay, time to go again. And so I think it makes for stronger felt when you can walk away from it for a couple of hours or a couple of days. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So I will see you again tomorrow. And Thursday, Throwback Thursday, well, we'll be throwing back to this project and we'll be finishing it up. So have a great day. Remember, stabthingsintoexistence.com. Sign up for notifications. Yesterday, I scheduled every local Topeka class for the entire year of 2022 at Leaping Llamas Artisan Shop. That doesn't mean that there won't be online classes. There will be those as well, and I'm going to be working on getting those ready to go before the end of the year so that we can kick off the new year with new classes for everybody, whether you can take a class locally or whether you want to take a class on your own, or whether you want to join me for a special live class a couple of times a year. So head over to stabthingsintoexistence.com, sign up for those notifications, and that way you won't miss anything. I will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great day.